Friday, so are you ready to rumble? It's time for this week's Big Picture Rumble, where I sit down with 3 expert political commentators to debate the week's top stories. On our panel tonight, Kerry Piggott, editor of the opinion page of the Washington Times and columnist for the Washington Times water cooler column. Eric Burns, strategic communications consultant with Bullfight Strategies and former president of Media Matters for America. And Vince Coglianese, homepage editor at the Daily Caller. All set? Let's get started here. Occupy Wall Street. The Occupy Wall Street movement has morphed, transformed, spread across the country. Los Angeles, Chicago, Louisville, Wichita, Hartford, Anchorage, Charlotte. Yeah, it sounds like a Johnny Cash song. The list goes on and on. Miami, Portland, 6,000 people in Portland, Oregon. The Republicans are quite upset about this, however. This is what Eric Cantor had to say about it.
I, for one, am increasingly concerned about the growing mobs occupying Wall Street and the other cities across the country. And believe it or not, some in this town have actually condoned the pitting of Americans against Americans.
The pitting of Americans against Americans. Let's see. Pitting unionized workers against non-unionized workers, pitting public sector workers against private sector workers, or actually the other way around, pitting people who depend on government programs against so-called job creators. Isn't Eric Cantor the guy who's really guilty of this?
The fourth-ranking House Democrat, John Larson, spoke with me a couple days ago, actually, and he said that this represents an Arab Spring in America. I mean, if the rhetoric of those who are now wanting to at least co-opt the movement, and you mentioned, I know earlier, that there are different forces that are attempting to co-opt this movement and make it their own. Sure. But if John Larson, one of the most powerful Democrats in the country, comes out and says this is like the Arab Spring in America, I think that might speak somewhat to Cantor's point, because in the Arab Spring you have the overthrow of government, whereas we assume that a movement like this is, of course, coming out to peaceably assemble, right?
I think, you know, the comparisons to the Arab Spring are really about young people that are disenfranchised rising up and having a voice. We don't have a dictatorship. There's not shooting. There's not violence.
But
that's
in the
not what this is about. What I think is really interesting is that Eric Cantor, the House Majority Leader, is condemning a peaceful protest on Wall Street when we had 2 years ago the Tea Party showing up at in front of the Capitol armed with guns and you know, signs with Obama and whiteface and spitting on civil rights leaders. Where was his?
Hold on a second. They were not spitting on civil rights
leaders.
They
absolutely did.
No, they did not.
John was not a civil rights leader?
No. They're not spitting on civil rights.
It's on video. And Emanuel Cleaver.
No. I actually no.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I actually did see the videotape. And first of all, you're referring to an old man who was speaking to Emanuel Cleaver, and maybe talking about spittle of an old man when Emanuel Cleaver was speaking to him. And we all speak to old men sometimes, and sometimes spittle comes out of the mouth. But we're not,
I'm not sure this is like angels dancing. I have a pen here. I mean,
you're referring to Hocker Loogie.
Is this Kerry? Is this a mob?
But hold on a second. Did the man actually spit at him, saying, "Okay, now I'm going to spit at you," and actually do something actually intentional? But the man didn't actually spit at him.
Every American.
Okay, no.
Every American.
Did the man actually?
Every American watched
the man did not actually spit at him.
Look, that's being said, though, that's not the point. Every American watched the racism, the Nazi references.
Tom, you mentioned mob mentality.
But that being said, though, hold on a second. As far as this whole Occupy Wall Street movement is concerned, there's huge hypocrisy going on here. They're saying, "Oh, these bank bailouts, it was absolutely horrible." But then, why is it that these Occupy Wall Street movement people are getting support from these unions who got auto bailouts? I mean,
unions didn't get any bailouts. General Motors did.
Yeah, and by the way,
the union members got to keep their jobs.
No,
that's a bailout.
And hold on a second. The actually auto unions actually did get bailouts, and the auto unions are actually giving money to the Occupy Wall Street.
Let's just look. You raised the question. I think, Kerry, you very legitimately, you raised the question. What's going on? Let's just take a look at a couple of very quick graphs. These people are calling themselves the 99%ers. Here in D.C., they made a 99 of human beings that you could photograph from the sky. I think it was in the Washington Post today. Here, executive pay has skyrocketed since the 1960s. We'll show it in the plasma. You can see a little to the right of the green spot there is 1980, is when Reagan dropped the top tax rate, and all of a sudden executive pay went up. Number two, 1%, the top 1%, own 42% of our entire financial wealth. And if you add the next 4 and 5%, that's 90%. That's about, well, 80% of us only own 7% of America. So the other 20% own 93%. Next slide, 1%, we're talking about the top 1%, own more than half of the nation's stocks and bonds. And number 4, the top 1% are sucking up wealth at a faster rate. This is, sure, run up to the plasma. And sure, and the top 1%. This next slide here. This right here is the top 1% right here. This is of all the stocks and bonds in the United States. Excuse me. This is the top 1%. This is the bottom 50%. This little tiny slice. And then the next one here. This is the bottom 90% in terms of income gains, and this is the top 1%. This is 1923, 1929. Now notice the bottom 90% were doing just fine in the 60s, in the 70s, and then Reagan came along and changed the tax order, and all of a sudden the really rich, and here's where we are now. And notice that this is identical to this. I mean, how does that make any sense?
But Tom, how much of that actually goes towards union pensions, though?
Well, look,
very little of it.
Yeah, very little. Look,
Really?
Yes.
I mean, hold on a second. You're actually complaining
I'm
about
talking about the
Wall
wages of
Street.
the top 1%.
This graph just shows you, it's a proof that supply-side economics does not work. It has never worked. The key to a healthy economy in this country is investing in people, investing in the middle class, investing in education, investing in infrastructure, the things that we did in the 1950s and 1960s that actually created, 60, 70 years of economic prosperity that's been squandered by Republicans and conservative fiscal policies over the last 20.
This Occupy Wall Street movement is made up of different organizations. It's not yet clear what they exactly want, and it's being pitched in that way because the media has adopted this. There's now seen as an answer to the Tea Party. It's at least, as hopefully, Van Jones wants it to be an answer to the Tea Party. And there's a lot of other organizations, including media organizations,
a lot of Tea Partiers are showing up.
who would like to see this
I wish I would
perpetuated.
replace the Tea Party because then we wouldn't have Eric Cantor.
And you have Ron Paul supporters and hardline Obama supporters that were out there mixed together right now.
I think this is the Tea Party, too. I think the Tea Party was saying the same thing.
The
We're
Occupy
sick and
Wall
tired
Street-
of the 1% screwing us.
The Occupy Wall Street people actually don't want the corporations to actually be people.
But the Tea Party didn't.
I mean, they actually said they actually don't want the Occupy Wall Street people actually don't want corporations to actually be thought of as persons. That's what they actually said in their demands.
And the Tea Party wasn't about anti-corporatism in the way that some of these organizations
Let's move along to the economy. New job numbers were released today show that our economy added 103,000 jobs last month. Unemployment is still 9.1%. 34,000 government jobs were lost last month. In 24 states run by Republicans, we have consistently over the last 3 years seen jobs lost. A total of 560,000 jobs, I believe, in those 24 states. In 25 states run by Democrats, where taxes have gone up, spending has gone up, unemployment's actually gone down. Government jobs have been gained, but the net loss has been over 500,000 government jobs. Without those losses in those states, with those Republican governors, unemployment right now would be 8% or below. So it sure looks to me like the Republicans are trying to set up a disastrous economy for 2012.
Well, look, Tom, you and I have talked about this before. Of course they are. I mean, this is what the debt ceiling standoff was all about. Something that the Congress has passed and increased the debt ceiling. I think something like 75 times this century. A standard legislative procedure and necessary one to pay our bills. But with that standoff and the resulting deal, that costs the economy 1.8 million jobs. This, Eric Cantor has said just yesterday that he is not going to bring a jobs bill to the floor that the president is trying to bring to the floor. This Republican...
Kyrie Reid didn't want to actually bring the jobs bill to the floor either over in the...
Well, he's actually he's bringing it next week, and he's adding a 5% surcharge to millionaires.
Over on the Senate side, he actually didn't...
But it's different because Eric Cantor...
He actually didn't want to do it through yesterday through the motions being suspended.
It was a clever bit of gamesmanship on the part of McConnell to be able to say, I want to bring this bill forward. But the clear point is that this bill doesn't represent a jobs bill. It is named a jobs bill. It's supposed to be a piece of legislation, but clearly it's an election tool. And everybody inside of Washington, as a matter of fact, everybody at this table does realize that it's an election tool being used by the Obama administration.
Don't you think that the government should play a role as the employer of last resort in the event of an economic disaster?
As the employer of I completely agree. The government should be the employer of absolute last resort. The idea is that if
we have a fifth of homeowners right now are within 90 days of foreclosure. You've got more than half of homeowners are underwater. You've got people who are the majority, and I forget the exact statistic, but the majority of people, regardless of their income right now, have, if they lost their job, they would be homeless within 6 months. I mean, tell me this is not a disaster?
Well, wait, let me just ask you a question, Vince. I mean, you're saying you're condemning the president for putting a jobs bill forward in a recession and saying, oh, this is political. Should he not? Should he just do nothing?
The criticism of the president is sound.
What's political, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
Eric Cantor saying, I refuse to bring this to the floor. Why would the majority leader of the House refuse to bring a jobs bill to the floor in the middle of the biggest recession since the Great Depression?
Republicans have consistently brought things to the floor.
But
They'd like to get passed. Now, here's the point. This jobs bill represents a vehicle by which Obama can organize, and we've all heard this, the Truman-style do-nothing Congress election campaign.
Well, if Congress is going to do nothing, it's an effort. Sure,
it's
absolutely.
All about optics,
he absolutely should. But Kerry, we have just a little less than a minute on this
Tom,
topic.
I actually spoke to a number of protesters out in New York, and I asked them about this jobs bill. And I said, do you think this jobs bill is going to actually help you get jobs? And a number of them said, no, I don't think so. You know, and so frankly, I think it's really up in the air as to whether or not this jobs bill...
1.5 million jobs is a drop in the bucket.
Frankly, I don't think this jobs bill is going to do anything. And frankly, I don't think a number of these protesters actually think that actually as well.
No, certainly, I think that there's a consensus of progressives anyway, that we need a whole hell of a lot more than this.
Absolutely.
But even this very, very modest step, the Republicans are saying, no, we won't do this. In any case, I'd like to move along. This is the Values Voters Summit is happening this weekend. And I find this particularly ironic that the Values Voters Summit is all about, you know, it's basically the Christian right. It's being put on by the American Family Association, I believe it is. And why would they, A, do it on the weekend that is the high holy days of one of the major religions in this country? It's Yom Kippur. And B, why, you know, when they're so aggressive about basically backing the Republican agenda, why are they ignoring Matthew 25? You know, the core of Christianity. This is the Christian right that is meeting. And, you know, there's only one place in the Bible where Jesus was confronted by his disciples and said, how do we get into heaven? And he said, you know, he said, I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. You know, in the last days, he's separating the sheep from the goats. He says, I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison and you came to visit me. And the disciples were freaked out. They said, hey, wait a minute. We never saw you hungry. How are we going to get to heaven? And he said, as you have done unto the least of these, your brethren, you have done unto me. That is completely off the table at the Values Voters Summit.
What you just vocalized actually does embody the majority of the people that attend this Value Voter Summit. And you ask, okay, well, doesn't that demonstrate? But you're suggesting that demonstrates hypocrisy. But the point is this: if you really want to get into the theological side of this, the moment you get to heaven, did your government coerce you to give your money to the government, and by virtue of the fact that you had bureaucracy in place to be able to distribute it, and does that represent like your brownie points towards heaven or whatever it is that you want to? I wouldn't think that they would answer that question in an affirmative. You have individuals who would like to do with their money what they will. And if you want to make this an issue of theology, if you want to make this an issue of theology, then clearly it really comes down to what's good for your soul and what do you do for yourself and what do you do for your fellow man as an individual.
We talk about what's good for your soul. There's the name values, you know, in the headline. This is classified as a hate group. I mean, these folks think
the Value Voter Summit is classified as a hate group.
The Southern Poverty Law Center,
a liberal group,
very legitimate, fact-based, reality-based,
which is very subjective to their own views.
Also
Thank
known
you
as
very
a fact-based group.
A liberal, subjective group.
You know,
thank you very much.
These guys, look, these are statements from the American Family Association. Homosexual agenda represents a clear and present danger to every fundamental right given to us by our Creator in the Constitution. You know, that's the goal of the homosexual agenda, to abolish all age of consent laws.
Okay, so hold on, Eric. You would then consider then the Bible to be a hate book?
No, I don't consider the Bible to be a hate book. I consider this group to be a hate organization because there's nothing Christian about this organization. I mean, I went to Catholic school my entire life, and
would you consider verses in the Bible concerning, say, homosexuality to be, say, hateful?
I think
Are
that,
there any in the New Testament?
No, I think if you're looking at like with Leviticus in the Old Testament, I mean, you know,
Would you consider them to be hateful, though?
I think that there are some that are outdated. But that's the New
The ones in
Testament
the Old Testament are right next to the
No.
ones that say you should be stoned to death
Or they-
if you talk back
What
to
we
your
do know
parents.
is that you can't just sequester the Voter Value Summit into some sort of irrelevancy. This represents a major share of the American public who really do identify with values issues and in a conservative
So where
way.
are the
But they're
values?
extremists. Yeah.
They're extremists by being
feed the hungry.
Right?
I mean, this,
Go, please.
Jesus just laid this out. Feed the hungry. I don't think that they want free soup kitchens or they want food stamps being given out.
This is considered to be
Heal
a
the sick. They don't want a
Judeo-Christian-
national health care system.
This is considered to be.
If it was Judeo-Christian, they wouldn't be doing it on Yom Kippur.
This is considered
This
to be,
is fundamentalist Christian.
No, this is considered to be a Judeo-Christian gathering, and you very well know this, Tom. Okay.
I think it's a fundamentalist Christian gathering, and I don't think that the Jews are very welcome.
Any
from what I
practicing Jew
understand.
would not be
I mean,
showing
That is
up
absolute
tomorrow.
nonsense.
Tomorrow is the
That is
day
absolute
the
nonsense.
practicing Jews don't even drink water. They don't
Yeah.
eat. They fast for 24 hours.
what you're
this is
saying-
the highest holy day of the year.
It's a definite
But
lack
what
of
you're saying
respect.
about these attendees and people who actually place stock in what goes on at the Value Voter Summit, that conversation, is that the only vehicle for which they can actually practice their Christianity or their Judaism is to do it through the government. I think that most people would find that absurd.
Okay,
Who suggested
we will agree on that.
Okay,
That government and religion shouldn't be mixed.
of course.
I'd like to move on to Afghanistan. As Amy Goodman pointed out a little earlier, today is the 10th anniversary of our invasion of Afghanistan. This is now the longest war in the history of the United States. George Washington didn't fight a war this long. No president has fought a war this long. I would say, frankly, that it's not a war. There's been no declaration of war, and B, it looks more like an occupation to me than a war. Occupations tend to go very, very badly, as the Soviet Union found out in the same place. So anyhow, General McChrystal came out and said today, and this was astounding. I remember in the last year of the Bush administration, I was down in New York, and it was an off-the-record interview. Not off the record, but it was pen and pad,
right?
With McChrystal. And I said, you know, when he was running the Afghanistan program, and I said, you know, what are you going to do about Afghanistan? And he said, I don't think we can kill our way out of this. And I came back on the radio and reported. I couldn't name him at the time. I can now. Anyhow, he said yesterday, he said, we didn't know enough, and we still don't know enough. Most of us, me included, had a very superficial understanding of the situation in history, and we had a frighteningly simplistic view of recent history the last 50 years. And then he went on to say that George Bush's decision to invade Iraq as well really screwed this thing up. So what are we going to do? Where do we go from here? George Bush has opened the gates of hell for two nations and a lot of our soldiers.
Tom, I think you're absolutely right. You know, there was no need to invade Iraq, and it really diverted the resources. It cost us billions of dollars. We got really very little out of it.
No need to invade Afghanistan. They offered to give us bin Laden.
You know, perhaps that's the case, but I will tell you this: you know, the president has set out a schedule for timeline. I mean, I like to see it accelerated because it's clear that there just is no path to victory here. You know, the Russians, you know, had a very, very similar frustrating experience that you know in the same region, you know,
and the British before them.
And the British before them.
And
no one has ever successfully.
So, Kerry, what does victory look like?
Well, unfortunately, we have the president here who certainly promised to get us out of Afghanistan, or actually...
No, actually, he promised to up the troops in Afghanistan. He said he'd get us out of Iraq.
But unfortunately, though, we're not out of Iraq. We're not out of Afghanistan. We're actually in Libya still. And frankly, what we are still experiencing here is a president who doesn't know how to lead in either in basically any of the nations that we are currently in right now.
How is it that President Obama doesn't know how to lead? I mean, he's the guy that got Osama bin Laden. We had 8 years of George W. Bush and 4 or 5 years of war under his administration that really produced nothing but record deficits and loss of American lives, untold losses of lives in the Middle East, destabilization in Middle Eastern countries. Disastrous responses to hurricanes.
Am I hearing three peaceniks here that we're all in agreement that it's time to stop?
Unfortunately, though,
stop building buildings in Afghanistan and start building buildings in the United States?
Afghanistan has had a major share of problems in its development, but I will say that to give Obama credit for carrying on the drone attacks, or whether it be credit or criticism, it's across the board, people about upping the drone attacks, about upping his military involvement. You do have to remember that George Bush actually laid the infrastructural groundwork for Obama to be where he is today. I mean, not just in the actual carrying out of the war,
with the economy as well,
but the actual use of these drone attacks. We saw Anwar al-Awlaki, a great strike done by the Obama administration, that type of activity couldn't have happened were it not for the type of intelligence gathering and the capability that's actually risen up.
I mean, look, I respect it. But I mean, this is exactly the kind of just bravado that we see from the right. That you guys will actually give George Bush credit.
Though, was actually considered to be a moderate. Okay, Anwar al-Awlaki, by the way, was actually considered to be a moderate for a very long time, and all of a sudden he turned to be, oh my gosh, he's actually a bad guy. Oh, we have to take him out. Well,
maybe he was a moderate for a while. Maybe 10 years of war.
And now he's a radical right winger.
Okay,
I mean,
maybe
people change.
Actually, maybe he actually never was. Maybe we actually should have kept our eye on him for the entire time.
Well, you know, either way, I mean, I think that it's clear, Tom, that there is no real end game in Afghanistan, and I don't know of anybody that's really been able to articulate one.
But meanwhile,
so you have to ask the question.
But meanwhile, you have countries like the Arab Spring that have gone through their Arab Springs, as it's been called, and there's this view that, well, democracy will take hold because the people will do it of their own accord.
Let's hope so. We have to wrap this topic. And rapid fire, just very quick answer. The Republican state representative Rich Workman has introduced House Bill 4063, legislation that repeals a Florida law that bans dwarf tossing. In case you're not familiar with this sport, here are some highlights. Workman thinks that this will help lower Florida's sky-high 10.7 unemployment rate. So if this is the new Republican jobs plan, what will be the consequences of legalizing dwarf tossing on a national scale? Will it be A, Hank Williams Jr. will have a new gig, that's one down in the unemployment numbers, or B, Nike will have a new sponsorship opportunity, the Tiger Woods scandal didn't quite tarnish their reputation enough, or C, Fox News will hack into the phones of top-tier dwarf tossing competitors, and in the ensuing scandal, Fox Sports will lose its exclusive broadcast rights to the National Dwarf Tossing League. What do you think?
I think that the representative should probably stick to what most of the GOP platform is. Once again, smaller government, lower taxes.
Okay.
Look,
leave the dwarfs alone.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, the answer, I think, clearly see. I mean, Fox News. And I got to say, Tom, I worked for a city councilman in Houston who was a dwarf, just passed away. And they are folks. They have rights, and I think it's indicative and a shame that the Republicans are doing this.
Movement.
Yeah, and they do have rights. They have rights to employment. And actually, Hank Williams Jr. I think would probably be the preferable solution here. I think Hank is obviously looking for a job. And the idea is that it's not an all-encompassing job solution. It's a little job solution.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay.
That's
my answer is that Sarah Palin's sitting on $1.6 million in her Sarah PAC she doesn't know what to do with. She can spend it on anything she wants because of the way the PAC was constructed. So she's going to follow in George Bush's footsteps, buying the Texas Rangers, and she's going to buy a dwarf tossing team. So we'll see. Anyway, Kerry.
A good reality show out of it, too, right?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You never know.
Kerry,
what you would expect from Sarah Palin.
Thank you all
Thanks
so much for being with us today.